tapped his microphone and looked right at me with a smirk that chilled me to the bone. In front of 300 elite guests at his 65th birthday gala, he laughed and said, "You're not my biological child, so I forgot to put your name in the will." The entire ballroom erupted in cruel, mocking laughter, except for me. My stepmother and half-siblings raised their glasses, celebrating my public humiliation. They thought they had completely destroyed my life and stolen my future. They thought I would run away crying. Instead, I calmly walked right up onto that stage, holding a single, crisp sheet of paper. As the room went dead silent, I looked my father dead in the eye and ripped it into pieces right in front of him. They smiled, thinking it was a temper tantrum. But when he managed to piece those scraps back together later that night, his face turned completely white. He realized his $4 million dream had just turned into dust. My name is Maya, and I am 26 years old. By profession, I am an architectural designer, a job that requires me to see the hidden structure in everything. But for the longest time, I couldn't see the structural flaws in my own family, or maybe I just chose to ignore them. I grew up in a massive, sprawling mansion just outside the city, a place of marble floors and soaring ceilings. To anyone looking from the outside, it was a dream. To me, it was nothing more than a golden cage. You see, my father, Richard, is a fiercely successful and deeply narcissistic real estate mogul. After my biological mother passed away, when I was just a little girl, he remarried Eleanor, a cold, calculating woman who brought her own son, Julian, into our lives. From that moment on, the dynamics completely shifted. Julian was treated like a golden prince, the rightful heir to the family empire, while I was pushed into the shadows. I was given a desk in the back of my father's multi-million-dollar firm, expected to pull all-nighters and do the heavy lifting on major blueprints, only for Julian to slap his name on the cover and take the credit. I tolerated the disrespect for years because I desperately craved my father's approval. I thought if I worked hard enough, he would finally see me as his daughter. Before I tell you what was on that ripped paper, how far Maya's story has traveled. My father had one obsession that consumed him completely: securing the landmark municipal contract for a new $4 million commercial plaza downtown. It was the crowning jewel that would cement his legacy forever. But there was a massive problem. Julian had been handed the lead on the project, and with his lack of talent, his concepts were a complete disaster. With only 4 months left before the final city council bidding deadline, our firm was on the absolute brink of losing the most critical deal in its history. That was when my father turned to me. I remember him walking into my cramped office late at night, his usual arrogance replaced by desperate pleading. He looked me dead in the eye and made a promise that changed everything. "Maya," he said, "fix this mess. Win us this contract, and I will officially name you a full partner in the firm and guarantee your next 4 months." I practically lived at my drafting table, fueled by coffee and the desperate hope that I was finally earning my place in the family. I poured all my soul, creativity, and architectural expertise into creating a groundbreaking, highly sustainable blueprint. When the city council board finally reviewed my master design, they were completely blown away and approved our bid on the spot. I had done it. I had saved the company, secured his $4 million dream, and believed my nightmare was finally over. The grand ballroom of the Grand Regent Hotel was a sea of glittering chandeliers, expensive tuxedos, and silk dresses. It was my father's 65th birthday gala, but everyone in the room knew it was actually a victory party for the $4 million plaza project. The city's entire business elite had gathered to toast the man of the hour. I sat at a side table, wearing my best dress, my heart racing with excitement. Tonight was the night my father had promised to publicly announce my partnership in the firm. I felt like I had finally earned my right to belong. As the dessert plates were cleared, Richard took the stage, soaking in the thunderous applause. He tapped the microphone, a smug smile stretching across his face as he looked out at the crowd. But as his eyes locked onto me, that smile turned incredibly cold. He began to speak, thanking everyone for their support, before his tone took a sharp, patronizing turn. "As we celebrate this monumental victory, I need to clear up a family matter, he announced, his voice echoing through the speakers. He pulled a piece of paper from his jacket. I recently ran some private tests, and it turns out Maya is not my biological child. So, I forgot to put her name in the will. The entire room erupted in cruel, mocking laughter. My stepmother Eleanor and half-brother Julian raised their champagne glasses, smirking at me from the front table, deeply enjoying the victory. The crowd whispered and chuckled, throwing pitiful and mocking glances at my table. My father stood on that stage, utterly enjoying my public humiliation, completely erasing 26 years of my life with a single, calculated lie. The grand ballroom of the Grand Regent Hotel was a sea of glittering chandeliers, expensive tuxedos, and silk dresses. It was my father's 65th birthday gala, but everyone in the room knew it was actually a victory party for the $4 million Plaza project. The city's entire business elite had gathered to toast the man of the hour. I sat at a side table, wearing my best dress, my heart racing with excitement. Tonight was the night my father had promised to publicly announce my partnership in the firm. I felt like I had finally earned my right to belong. As the dessert plates were cleared, Richard took the stage, soaking in the thunderous applause. He tapped the microphone, a smug smile stretching across his face as he looked out at the crowd. But as his eyes locked onto me, that smile turned incredibly cold. He began to speak, thanking everyone for their support, before his tone took a sharp, patronizing turn. As we celebrate this monumental victory, I need to clear up a family matter, he announced, his voice echoing through the speakers. He pulled a piece of paper from his jacket. I recently ran some private tests, and it turns out Maya is not my biological child. So, I forgot to put her name in the will. The entire room erupted in cruel, mocking laughter. My stepmother Eleanor and half-brother Julian raised their champagne glasses, smirking at me from the front table, deeply enjoying the victory. The crowd whispered and chuckled, throwing pitiful and mocking glances at my table. My father stood on that stage, utterly enjoying my public humiliation, completely erasing 26 years of my life with a single, calculated lie. As the waves of mocking laughter washed over me, something strange happened inside my mind. The burning humiliation suddenly vanished, replaced by a wave of absolute, freezing clarity. The tears that had threatened to spill from my eyes instantly dried up. I looked at Richard, Eleanor, and Julian, and for the first time in my 26 years, I saw them for exactly what they were. I was never a daughter to them. I was never family. I was just an asset to be drained, a tool to be exploited, and a scapegoat to be publicly discarded once my usefulness was over. Slowly, I stood up from my chair. The whispers at the surrounding tables died down as I calmly walked across the ballroom floor. I walked right up the stairs and onto that brightly lit stage. The murmuring crowd went dead silent, expecting me to beg, cry, or scream. Richard just smirked, adjusting his microphone as if waiting for me to make a fool of myself. I reached into my small clutch and placed my gift on the center table, a single, crisp document. Then, looking directly at my father, I didn't say a single word. I smiled calmly, took the document, and ripped it into tiny, shredded pieces right in front of his face. I let the white scraps flutter out of my hands, scattering across the stage floor like snow. I turned around and walked out of that hall with my head held high, leaving them smiling at my childish tantrum. After I walked out of the Grand Regent Hotel, Richard and Julian dismissed my actions as nothing more than a pathetic, emotional outburst from a bitter girl. They laughed it off, ordered more champagne, and continued partying late into the night with their wealthy friends. To them, the real prize was already won. The $4 million municipal contract was theirs, and they had successfully removed me from their family empire without a single cent to my name. But their celebration was cut incredibly short. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Richard and Julian returned to the office, frantically working to finalize the digital contract submission packets required by the city council before the strict 9 o'clock morning deadline. That was when they stumbled upon a devastating, catastrophic roadblock. As they opened the legal portal, the system rejected their filing, flashing an immediate warning. The city's municipal board required a very specific document to validate the entire project: the master copyright release form and the structural engineering stamp, signed exclusively by the original register designer. Without that signature, their entire proposal was completely fraudulent. Suddenly, a horrific realization dawned on my father. He sprinted back to his desk, dumped the trash can, and frantically began taping the shredded scraps of paper from the stage back together. He stayed up for hours, sweating, his hands shaking as he matched the jagged edges. When he finally pieced the document together, his face turned completely white. It wasn't a copy of his will that I had destroyed. It was my official, legal revocation of his permission to use my architectural designs. I had completely pulled the rug out from under him, turning his $4 million dream into absolute dust. By 7 o'clock the next morning, the arrogant silence from my family was entirely shattered. My phone began buzzing uncontrollably on my nightstand. It was a barrage of missed calls and frantic text messages from Richard and Julian, their previous mocking tones completely replaced by a sense of sheer, unadulterated desperation. Realizing they were completely trapped, they practically begged me to meet them at a local cafe down the street from our old office building. When I walked in, the sight was pathetic. Richard, the all-powerful real estate mogul who had publicly humiliated me just hours before, looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. He slid a fresh legal release form across the table, along with a check for $50,000. "Maya, please," he stammered, his hands visibly trembling. "We need your signature before the city council deadline in an hour. Sign this, and we can put this little misunderstanding behind us." I looked at the paperwork, then looked directly into his panicked eyes, and slowly pushed the check back across the table. "You stood on that stage last night and proudly told 300 people that I am not your biological daughter," I said, my voice completely calm and even. "You told the entire city that I am not a part of your family. And since I am not your family, I owe you absolutely nothing." Julian tried to threaten me with legal action, but I just smiled. They had completely run out of time. The 9 o'clock deadline passed, the city officially pulled the $4 million contract, and the firm collapsed into immediate bankruptcy. 3 months after the spectacular collapse of my father's firm, I finally stepped out from the shadows they had cast over me for so long. I officially launched my own independent architectural studio. Because the drama surrounding the Municipal Plaza project had been highly publicized in the local business news, the city's top clients already knew exactly who had created those brilliant, award-winning designs. They didn't want to deal with a broken family empire. They wanted to work directly with the actual talent. Contracts and design requests began flooding into my new office. Meanwhile, justice took its natural course for the people who had tried so hard to destroy me. Julian was forced to swallow his pride and take a low-paying retail job at a local mall just to make ends meet. Richard had to liquidate his assets, including his beloved luxury cars, and ultimately sell our childhood mansion just to pay off his massive corporate debts to angry investors. He now lives in a tiny, cramped apartment, completely broken by the reality of his own unchecked greed. Standing up for myself on that stage completely changed the trajectory of my life. I realized that a real legacy isn't something you inherit through a bloodline. It's something you build with your own 2 hands. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. If you were in my shoes, would you have ruined their dream on stage? Subscribe and click on the next video on your screen for more unbelievable